Welcome. It feels so wonderful to be here, right? As we officially launch this portion of the agenda, I want to recognize and a warm thank you to all of the students, all of the MIT community members, and our collaborators for sharing their insightful work during the showcases. So thank you so much. I want to share a little bit of my journey. I began climate-related work at MIT as I began my PhD in '98 with Seymour Papert at the Media Lab. And we were developing, part of the work that we were doing was developing curriculum, toolkits, technologies, running professional development, and more importantly, running like innovative camps for high school students around the world. The most insightful part was not only what we learned from those people, but some of the work that was transformational for me came from Peter Senge and from Linda Buzzuini. And that work came from Sloan. And it had to do with system thinking and the relationship that it has to learning and learning about the real world and what it matters and how it matters for world learning, for problem solving. So I kept some of those insights, and that has been really transformational for my career. And just to quote Peter, systems thinking is a discipline for seeing the whole rather than just the parts, and for understanding how things fit together and change over time. So understanding the interconnectedness of the work and the actions that bring us together, the power of collecting efforts, really brings us hope today and brings us together at this event. As I prepare for this event and talking to Peter this week, he reminds us that climate change offers a unique opportunity because it's the first time in human history that all nations face a common problem, and that's not always seen. We have very little opportunity to experience something like that. Leading this climate work, Day of Climate, has been an honor this year. We take this work seriously, so I want to acknowledge the team that has been in support, all of the members of my team that have been in support of this work this year. We come together to acknowledge the urgency of the current challenges the world is facing. We recognize the collective work that many individuals that I just mentioned and organizations that represent them are doing. And I emphasize recognize because I feel like it's hard to think about celebrating when we need to recognize all the work that is ahead of us. I encourage everyone to listen to our speakers. They're here to inspire us. They're here to ignite our collective actions towards a better future. And they're here to elevate the leaders of tomorrow, you young people. Before I introduce our first speaker, there is an important emotional dimension that I want to highlight, and it's the importance of love. Falling in love with knowledge, falling in love with learning, with action, and with the people you work with. So welcome, everyone.
Please welcome Chris Knittel, Associate Dean for Climate and Sustainability, Professor of Applied Economics, and Faculty Director of Day of Climate at MIT CATE.
Woo. Great, thank you very much. One more round of applause for Claudia and the team for pulling this off. An amazing job, an amazing venue. As was mentioned, my name's Chris Knittel. My main job here at MIT is I'm a professor of applied economics in the Sloan School of Management, but I'm here to represent 4 groups around campus that came together a few years ago to develop a high school curriculum on climate change. So the first is, as I mentioned, I'm a Sloan faculty member, and it occurred to me a few years ago that we at MIT have a lot of resources available, not just to MIT students, but to K through 12 more generally. And that got me really excited about potentially developing a high school curriculum that was based on MIT resources and based on MIT research. And that came together with some other organizations on campus that I'm involved with. The first is the Center for Energy and Environmental Policy Research that has been around for almost 50 years, does research on trying to understand the costs associated with pollution, the costs associated with climate, but more importantly, what we can do to address environmental concerns. I'm also faculty director of what's a new center on campus known as the MIT Climate Policy Center, and that's working hand in hand with policymakers at the state level, the national level, and the international level to actually do something about climate. And then finally, 2 years ago our president, Sally Kornbluth, announced the Climate Project. The Climate Project, in her own words, is an all of MIT climate project that's going to bring together all the schools around campus, all the disciplines to actually have a meaningful impact on the trajectory of climate change over the next 10 years. So I want you to keep an eye on what we do under the Climate Project. But that all came together to what we call CATE, so Climate Action Through Education. It's a interdisciplinary high school curriculum that's science-based, standards-based, and modular. And most importantly, it's free. And rest assured, us faculty at MIT did not develop the curriculum. It would have been impenetrable and certainly not be effective. I had this vision of a one-week curriculum where every school just spends an entire week across all the disciplines on climate. We met with some teachers and they said, well, that would be great, but nobody would ever use that. So at that point, I said, we gotta actually go to the professionals here. We have hired 5 fabulous curriculum developers that are current Massachusetts high school teachers. If you go to the CATE website, you'll see 30 lesson plans that are free to download. Each lesson plan has background material for the teacher, background material for the student, some sort of lab or assessment, and more importantly, a sheet of standards that curriculum meets. I wasn't going to say this, but it really speaks to the importance of an event like this. The actual reason why I wanted to develop that curriculum is 2 years prior to that, my dad, who was a high school math teacher, got in his mailbox a high school climate change curriculum. And he gave it to me to look at, and it was all climate misinformation. So it just points to the importance of us coming together to share actual science-based facts on the importance of addressing climate change, how we can address it, and more importantly, understand its impacts across society. So it's days like this, a day of climate, that is just a small stepping stone in actually solving this worldwide dilemma. And I look at all you kids, because unfortunately the old guys like me are not going to be able to do it. But I trust that you will be able to do it. So let's end by giving yourselves a round of applause for addressing climate change.
Please welcome Pete Bouchard, Chief Meteorologist at NBC Boston.
Hi, everybody. That's an old picture of me, right? Yeah. Am I good? Oh, I changed the slides. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful to be here today. It's a little drab out there, a little cool, a little chilly. Is it too big? Yeah. Should I just turn this one off? Nobody likes feedback. So I've been on a little bit of a time kick recently. I think it's a little bit because I'm middle-aged now, and I've got a lot more years behind me than I did ahead of me. I'll just shut this off. Or just take it out, right? So I learned, in the shallow surface that I'm scratching here of time, I learned that time is a little bit of an illusion, right? When we look ahead into other galaxies, and we look ahead to like with the James Webb Telescope, for instance, or the Hubble, you go look millions of years, and then distance, really, it's millions of light years away. and you see those galaxies and those objects as they once were.
Facing the speaker a little bit.
For the purposes of this meeting, I'm only going 15 minutes, so even though time is an illusion, we still have to stick on it. So back to the discussion. So, and this is a little deep too for some people, but if you think about it, that is the past you're looking at. And it's hard to conceptualize that because if you thought about like maybe a civilization sending you a selfie, it would take millions of years for you to get it. So you saw that selfie as that civilization appeared millions of years ago. And when it comes to you at that time, it's millions of years old. And the same thing if you look into the future, right? If we could travel the speed of light, we would go the speed of light and you'd go into the future in a sense because time would stop for you. You'd come back and maybe a decade or 2 decades would have passed for you on Earth and you would have aged on Earth. But for you, it would have been a blip of time. And then we think of time in the sense of the now, right? There's only the now. When we think of time and what they conceptualize as time is only now. You can't go back to the past. The future is undecided. And when I think about that, I think about climate change and how the now is probably the most important part of where we are, right? Because we can't change the past. We're living on what happened in the past. And in the future, it's still undecided. We still don't know what's going to happen. But if we plan for the now, if we plan for the future, and everything that we can do to stem the tide of emissions, do the work that you're doing, we can actually make a difference. But we're at the precipice. Time is short. There's not a lot of it left. We live in a bubble, right? We're in a greenhouse, closed system. You don't have a lot of venting in that system. The only way you can get rid of carbon and greenhouse gases is to consume them. And they take hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years in the case of carbon, before it actually is whittled away. So that's the problem we have going forward. So the time to act is now. Oh, sorry, my bad. It would help. So when we think about it, now is the future, in the sense that we don't do something about it now, the future is pre-decided. And again, in my limited knowledge of the human psyche, I've gone into a little bit of research in this too. I took a course in climate communication at Bentley a few years ago, with a great professor, by the way. And shifting baseline is one of the things that the human mind goes right to immediately. Our grandparents' climate is not our climate, and not the climate of the future, too. So when we actually engage with people, you have to take that into account. Climate change is something that they perceive, but it's changed. And right here at MIT, they did research many years ago, and it takes about 5 years in general before temperatures become unremarkable. So you hit 70 in Christmas. Big deal, right? Becomes normal after a period of 5 years. It's normalized, unfortunately. Climate change is also a cultural cognition thing. Unconscious process where which causes people to shape their beliefs on disputed matters of fact based on their values. So, there's obviously the hype with the fake news. The planet is warming at an alarming rate, not seen in thousands of years, perhaps millions of years. And everybody's an expert on this, right, too. And there's another part of it that I won't go into. It's attribute substitution, which is essentially if it's 90 degrees today, of course the climate is changing. It's very warm, but if it's 20 below tomorrow, are you insane? That's crazy. Of course it's not. Politicians would have you think that there are 2 Americas, a blue and a red America, right? But in essence, there are 6 Americas when we talk about climate change. There are the people that are alarmed, that are concerned, that are cautious. And then there are a few that are disengaged, kind of agnostic, they don't know. The doubtful ones too, and the dismissive ones. So when you add those up, that's 27% of the population. But they get all of the talk, all of the chatter on social media. They're the ones that always troll, right? They're the ones that are always in your face. They want you to disengage. They want you to back away. They don't want you to be a part of the conversation. They want to be front and center. But the vast majority of people have your back. And when you think about it, this is the latest research, by the way, from Yale University. This just came out last December. So this is very topical. And when you think about the people who are interested in knowing more with stories, news stories, and they want to know whether it's happening or not, 74% of the population, when you look at the country, it's not blue and red. It's not polarized. it seems like a vast majority of people, even in states that don't have a lot of knowledge about climate change or maybe dismissive about the idea of climate change, they are engaged here. They want to know. And when you think about what stories they want to hear about, it is interesting at the bottom. Candidates for president, that is interesting at the very bottom. Presidential candidates plan in response to global warming. 76% of the population wants to know more about that? I find that intriguing too. But generally, again, the minority of people are not at all interested, 20%, and that's across the board in news about climate change. Katharine Hayhoe, a very famous climate scientist, had a great quote, and she balances what? Life and career and faith, which is involved in science, and that is very difficult to actually balance. She had a quote, she said, "The biggest problem we have is not the people who willfully decide to reject 200 years of basic science. The bigger problem is the number of people who say it's real, but don't do anything about it, and don't think it matters to them." That's a vast, vast gap that we have to close, and that's the issue, right, going forward too. So our issue is obviously tapping into that, but we live in a bubble. We come to these conferences and we talk about it, and then we leave and we go, that felt good. Because we're with our tribe. We're very tribal. We're with our people. We have backup. We have common interests. But obviously there's 72%, 73% of the population that still wants to know something about climate change. When you look at it in a statewide perspective, it comes down to the blue and the orange here. And you can see some states are kind of dismissive of the idea. And then here's the tribalism involved, right? Then you go down to the county level, and the little fiefdoms in there, and everybody kind of just squirrels away. So it's about kind of just homogenizing the whole conversation and bringing it out there, and also making it accessible to people who really want to know. And I think by staying in our groups and staying within our own like-minded people, that we miss that opportunity, I think. And then the estimated people, adults who think global warming is happening, wow, that's also pretty enlightening too. Again, in the 70% change, in the 70%. So that is the challenge going forward. And obviously it can be a very difficult thing too when you're talking about trying to change someone's mind. There are people who will never change their mind, and I've run into those. And so it's a waste of time to engage in that sense too. So there's a limit to what we can tolerate, anybody can tolerate. It's a crazy thing too, because some of those that you don't reach, again, will want to come after you, especially if you're in the media. But I find it interesting too, as the next generation moving up is not really fazed by that. They're still formulating their opinions. They're still with the idea of what they believe in, and what they believe in is, the planet is warming. We're going to do something about it. My generation wasn't really like that, and I kind of feel weird about that. But also it does mean that there's a lot of work ahead, right? And to quote another famous professor, Professor Dumbledore, for those who like Harry Potter, dark times lie ahead of us. There will be a time when we must choose between what is right and what is easy. Obviously, it's not an easy task. There's a lot of work ahead, and there's a lot of dark times. And that can be a little bit more on the anxiety level, right? And that is a big thing, too. Doomism is a thing in climate change. If you go and you scroll, and doom scroll, as they say, the climate discussions, the job is overwhelming. You can fall into a spiral, and there can be no coming out of that. Climate anxiety isn't dismissive, and it shouldn't be dismissed. It's apparent. And it honestly can fall on the lines of race and gender, too. This graphic, too, also from Yale University, shows that Latinos are mostly affected by this. 17% of those who think it's an issue, an overall issue, and some of that is severe, some of it is moderate, some of it is mild. Gen Z, there you are, and the millennials. Male versus female, Gen X, honestly, to throw the weight of my generation upon my shoulders. It does feel like, we saw the train coming, we heard the sirens, the gate went down, and we didn't do much about it. It feels like we didn't really get engaged. And some of that might have been the fact that, not to defend it, but some of it might have been the fact that we didn't have a lot of information in the 90s. I remember going to conferences, and it was just like we kind of sat around and we're like, we think it's warming, we're pretty certain it's warming, but our models weren't great. They didn't simulate the atmosphere as well as they do now, which is all the more reason to believe the data, right? And it is funny, too, because I saw the program and it said Pete Bouchard, climate activist. And I had to pause for a second. I thought, am I really? Have I really done enough? I mean, I go to conferences, I speak about it a lot. But it is something that you kind of think back, I'm like, there's always something you could do more. You can always really take up the cause. And again, it's your generation inspiring mine and inspiring me to come to these conferences and talk to you about it too. But anxiety and climate psychological distress is also something I think that is playing a role in what we're seeing now with social media and how we perceive how we're going to go forward, how we're going to attack this whole subject matter. And it is necessary for you to find help if it really does bother you. And it's okay to step back, right? I do woodworking on the side, and sometimes I get really tangled up in some of the geometry or the joinery that I'm doing, and I actually have to step away from it, and I come back to it and I go, wow, what was I thinking, right? Because that can be something that can be regenerating to you. And fall back on your peers too. That tribalism, that's your core. You know, when you go out there in the open and you're expanding your horizons and you're confronting these people, it's okay to fall back and say, hang on, I need a second. So if the planet could speak to us, what do you think it would say these days, right? If we personified the planet, it probably would say, what are you doing? And also, does it feel a little warm in here to you, right? Those are the things that you can think about. But also, it might be saying, thank you. For the people who are doing the work out there, stay hopeful and don't give up hope. Thanks. Look again.
Please welcome our panel moderated by Margaret Wang Agania, Executive Director and co-founder of Subject to Climate.
Works. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. And today symbolizes a lot of great things. It symbolizes the Day of Climate Resources launching, which is fantastic. But I also think it symbolizes how we democratize climate knowledge, and in the place where I think makes the most sense, in the classroom. So. And also what it symbolizes is not only, upcoming Earth Day, not only Earth Month, but I think it shows that this is something that we need to be teaching every day, needs to be integrated across all grade levels and subjects, because our students and our learners and our kids deserve to learn about the world around them and what's happening. And it's not something we leave it just for them to solve on their own. It's something that we all work intergenerationally together, and the classroom is a great way to start. So I used to be a teacher. I used to be a social studies teacher, and I saw how it activated my students, and now I run a nonprofit called Subject to Climate, where we help educators integrate climate into all grade levels and subjects. So I'm very excited about this panel, because studies show that if you teach about climate, it'll lead to immediate carbon reductions, and then also students change their parents' minds, and it'll also affect their communities because they'll take action. So I'd love to hear directly from learners, students, and educators. So if we can welcome them with an applause, and we'll get started. So first off, I would love for you all to introduce yourself, what you do, and what inspired you to get involved in climate. Like, was there an aha moment or something that happened? And we can start with you, Naima.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Naima Said, and I'm a former high school French teacher. So on the personal level, I'm originally from North Africa, Algeria, and in 2018, just watching the region I'm from, a lot of villages burned to the ground due to forest fires. So that was very devastating. And then in the classroom, as a French teacher, I had a lot of English learners, and then coming to the realization that a lot of those students did not have access to one class that the high school offers, environmental science class, but they were fluent in French. So I took advantage of that and started teaching about climate change in the classroom in all levels. And then realizing during that journey that a lot of those students were also part of a youth hub, Sunrise, in Somerville, and they had their little community. And from there it was a long journey of figuring out in the classroom what we can learn about climate action at the local level, but also how they can take that and do more local climate advocacy. And I will talk more about that later. So it's all these different things.
That's amazing. And you can learn it in French class as well, which I love. And then love to hear from your perspective, Lelia. What about you?
So hi, my name's Lelia. I'm here with the Center for Systems Awareness, which is a compassion-based education reform nonprofit. I'm a product of public institutions. I went to public school my entire life in a very small town in Northern California. And for me, the pull towards climate change wasn't necessarily an aha moment. I was raised in a spiritual practice that values the environment and protecting it. And alongside growing up in the redwoods, which are the tallest living things on planet Earth, they're trees, and I feel a great amount of respect and very humbled by them. So for me, protecting the environment and going towards climate education wasn't a moment, it was more of a moral imperative.
It's very powerful. Thank you, Lelia. And Sophie, you represent another student perspective, so what about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm so excited to see so many young faces here today. I'm a student at Arlington High School. I'm a senior graduating this year. And I run the Slash the Trash team, which I co-founded, which basically we do a lot of work about diverting our lunchroom waste into composting, recycling, trash. And we also do a lot of education work. So we do environmental justice presentations for high schoolers, and we also do work about learning about how policies impact our environment for elementary schoolers. I guess for me, the reason why I'm so excited to be here today is because I've had so many great educators in my life who have taught me a lot about the climate. I remember all the way back to elementary school, my green team at Dallin Elementary, shout out. Rachel Oliveri, she's our school sustainability coordinator, and she helped out with the green teams. I remember this one very memorable experience where we learned about milkweed and how monarch butterflies thrive off of milkweed. And so I'm really excited to talk to you all today.
Wonderful. And speaking of sustainability coordinators and at admin level, Dave, what about you?
That's what I do. My name is Dave Kramer. I'm the director of green programs at a school called Boston Green Academy. Shout out to my colleague Dina right there in front of me. She's from Boston Green Academy as well. At the school, they call me Big Green Dave. I don't know if I earned that, especially with other guests here today. But I think I became passionate about climate and sustainability education as a result of kind of a gradual process. I grew up in Florida, which clearly now is very vulnerable. Went to college in New Hampshire and really fell in love with the outdoors and mountains and whatnot. But the main catalyst for me was moving into Colombia, the country of Colombia, and teaching there right out of college. It opened a whole new world to me, and I saw ecosystems at every different altitude, all these different areas in the country and different cultures that really sparked my curiosity and interest. So I tried to bring that back to students every day and try to work to help young people care. I think most people care, and just to highlight it in their day-to-day, and also to spark curiosity, wonder, and awe. I'm really honored to be here today, so thanks for being here.
Amazing. And so we hear a lot of themes of lived experiences, connection to nature. A lot of times that's what sparks climate action and interest in climate. So I want to start off with, we have two educators here. So I want to learn more about how have you integrated climate, or how have you seen other educators integrate climate in the classroom? And what are the effects that you've seen on students? And we can start with this time with you, Dave.
Okay, go right back down. At Boston Green Academy, anyway, I think we do a lot of work to integrate climate and sustainability and environmental justice across different classes and curriculum. For example, we have a tradition called green exhibitions at the end of the school year where teachers may complain in the planning process. It's a lot of work, but they basically let go of their regular classes for 2 or 3 weeks, some even longer, and have kind of an interdisciplinary approach to looking at everything from food justice and food systems to intersectional issues related to climate and justice. And our youngest students kind of look at what does it mean to be a green school and how can we make it better, and I invite them to bring suggestions. I think also just one example of a teacher that does an awesome job in our school is our 12th grade green engineering and physics teacher. Very project-based, and we actually have a student who's starting an internship at the Zero Waste program in Boston, in the city of Boston, who told her just a couple of days ago, you know, this school pushes sustainability and climate all the time down our throats, but you know what, this project where I had to use upcycling and do a Shark Tank style presentation really taught me that this matters, and it was really enriching, and I'm looking forward to my internship. So that right there was just sort of proof that kids may complain along the way, but a lot is seeping in through teachers and others who are trying to weave climate sustainability across every subject, including French.
Great. And, you know, I had the privilege of visiting the green exhibitions in Boston Green Academy. And if people are interested, Dave will talk to you afterwards and invite you. It is really great to see those different interdisciplinary projects. And also visiting Boston Green Academy is great, too. There's the hydroponic freight farms, right, as well?
We're in Brighton, I forgot to mention, but yeah, we have a freight farm, which is a retrofitted shipping container for growing vegetables all year long, and finally serving that in our cafeteria too.
Yeah, who wouldn't want that in their classroom, right? That's real skills like that they're learning. And so, Naima, what about you? I know that you were in Somerville, so.
Yes. So as I said, I was a classroom French teacher. And at first, they just started teaching about climate change in all the levels. And then my students started asking for specific things. They started to feel very powerless in terms of what we can do. So they asked that we focus on what we can do locally. That they really took ownership of their learning. And I would just mention a few things that they've done. They hosted the climate panel, and they invited educators, they invited student climate activists, they invited city staff from the Office of Sustainability, and also some climate activists in the community, and we're asking them questions about all sorts of things, like how many trees are we planting? Like, what can we do to create more sustainable modes of transportation? And green roofs, they even had elected officials, so they asked about ordinances and what we can do at the city level. So that was very inspiring because they invited the whole school, and they were also trying to recruit more students to join the climate hub that they created in the community. And outside of the classroom, they did a lot of things. One, they decided to put a questionnaire together and make endorsements during elections. So they put a climate platform together, endorsed candidates for mayor, for city council, and had them commit to certain things, that they will do everything to offer blue bike passes, free blue bike passes for staff, for students, that they would be more funding for parks and a lot of other things, even green roofs, which is part of zoning. So it was very inspiring to watch them do that. And also, they worked with the teachers. We'll get to that part later, but I was part of a teachers union, and they worked with their teachers to push the district of Somerville to start a path towards mandating climate change education in all subjects and grades. Actually, that was negotiated during a teacher contract negotiation, and it passed, making Somerville the first city in Massachusetts to have done that. So we're still at the very initial phase and still figuring out how to do that, but yeah. This was a collaboration between teachers and students, and that was very, very powerful.
Right, and I remember that's when we met Naima, when I found out about Somerville Public Schools having climate change be a requirement. And this really gets us back to this is an intergenerational collaborative effort. And oftentimes we walk into this problem saying, oh my gosh, there's so much we don't have. But I'm here to show you that we need to look at an asset-based approach. Look at how much we do have right now. These are just two amazing teachers, educators with their stories. And I want to now turn it over to our learners, our students. And so for students, what about you? How has learning about climate impacted you and influenced you? So we'll start with you, Sophie.
Yeah, so growing up, I've never really known a time where climate change hasn't been an existential threat to our globe. And so I think that has formed a lot of the career path that I've decided to take in life. I see a lot of, as we were talking about, like interdisciplinary connections between government, literature, and the climate. And so I'm really interested in town government like Naima is. I interned at our Department of Public Works, and I'm now an elected official as town meeting representative. And, thank you. And I think that's really, learning about climate change has inspired me to take action on like a wider systemic level in that sense.
That's amazing, and it's not just, you're seeing like it's not just a science problem. There's so many layers, and Sophie has really, been able to leverage what she's learned in social studies, for example. And Lelia, what about you?
For me, it seems kind of paradoxical, but I actually gained a lot of hope through my climate education. The climate education program that my organization puts on goes deeply into the social and emotional aspect of the climate crisis. I know, like Sophie, I've struggled a lot with climate anxiety and depression and doomism of my public officials aren't doing anything, the companies aren't doing anything, how are we ever going to change this? And being able to critically reflect on my own thought processes and feelings have allowed me to show it more presently in these climate spaces, alongside learning about the amazing initiatives that students and teachers and just people across the world have done that have deeply changed their local ecosystems. It's very inspiring. And I would say just the ability to stay present in the work I do has been the greatest skill I've gained through my climate education.
Amazing. And that's a really important thing. I know Pete talked about climate anxiety, and one thing is that when you teach about it, you can also teach about the solutions, because also quoting Katherine Hayhoe, which Pete did, is that, Katherine Hayhoe talks about, it feels like you're pushing a boulder, but when you're doing a little bit, you feel like you're making progress, but when you see other people joining you, it just, you're not alone, and that can be the difference from anxiety to hope. And so, again, we hear all these stories from educators and students, and they're doing amazing things. And so we need more of this in classrooms. So in your all's perspective, what is needed to accelerate this, like bring climate change education to schools and communities? And we can start with Sophie this time.
Yeah, I guess maybe to touch a little bit more on what I was saying earlier about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary learning, I guess I want to give a quick shout out to the CATE program that was also presenting today. I see a lot of the ways in which we can talk about climate through different angles, and that makes it more approachable for different students who have different aptitudes. And so, for example, in literature classes, we can talk about romanticism and environmental preservation. We can talk about how infrastructure bills in our government are impacting our environment. And so I think it's really important to lower that barrier to entry by engaging students with topics that they are already familiar with, already passionate about. And I think that's a great way to introduce it.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think that fundamentally climate change education is not a STEM, science and math issue. I think I've had people kind of talk to me and think that I must be a science educator. I was an English major, an education minor, then environmental policy in grad school. I think that it takes all the angles Sophie mentioned to tackle this, and different people get kind of hooked into it by different personalities in their classrooms and different subjects. I also think that teachers are very unlikely to incorporate without standards like Somerville's or the state of New York or New Jersey, right? I think if anyone here wants to advocate at the state level in Massachusetts, I know Margaret would be willing to help you, but I think we really need to mandate climate change as standards across the board in education, and that will make it a lot easier for teachers to be able to do it. Even though it adds more work, it's just something that they have to do. So.
Right, and it's, again, this idea of there's just so many requirements of how can we bake it into what they're already going to have to teach, and standards are what they already have to teach. And Lelia, what about your perspectives on this?
I went to a school in a very small rural town in California that my community has the highest rate of childhood trauma and an above average rate of poverty. So kids show up to school and they're not ready to learn. They're not ready to be engaged. So I see the intro to climate solutions in schools is to radically invest in students' well-being and academic needs. So showing up with food security, housing security, and a community that is focused on creativity and a passion for learning. Communities in the US that are most affected by climate change are Black and brown and poor communities. These are the students that we need to invest in to make sure that they are ready to show up and engage in the content that we are giving them.
Yeah, so I'll repeat some of the things that were already said because it's important to, say it again, mandating climate education in all subjects and grades. And what it means is you need funding for that, right? So one, at the state level, the adults in the room, reach out to your state representative. There's a bill at the state level that for exactly that. So if that bill is passed, districts will be able to get that funding from the state. So that's one thing. At the local level, get to know your school committee representatives as well. Because in Somerville, again, we started that journey, but it does require a lot of funding to train teachers to buy curriculum. So making sure that every year there's a budget that's dedicated to that, and teachers are being paid for this work. So these are a few things that we can do at the local level.
And I think we've gotten a lot of different advice on, these are things that can help accelerate. And so maybe you're thinking, okay, this is amazing. What's my next steps? What do I do next? So in closing, I'd love to ask our panelists to share, just a lightning round. What's your call to action? What's advice for people listening here who are like, okay, I understand that this is what is needed, but what can be my very next step? And yeah.
I'm happy to go, and we'll just go down the line, I guess. I would say, honestly, come visit schools, go to schools, come to Boston Green Academy, go to other schools that are doing this kind of work. I don't think you can advocate for change without knowing what it's like. Mm-hmm. Some days are really heavy in schools, and everyone needs to understand that and match kind of the energy with what you can recommend. But you're welcome to come, and as Margaret said, if anyone wants to talk to me about end of the year events, we have a lot, and they're fun.
I guess just to call back to something that Mr. Bouchard was saying earlier, there's a lot of misinformation in the world, so teachers keep doing your job, and students be willing to engage with that material. And there are so many ways to get involved. That could be starting a community garden. They can be great community hubs, great learning spaces. That could include advocating to your local or your state government. They're super accessible a lot of times, and that's a really great way to get your voice heard.
For individuals, I really recommend checking out the On-Road Simulator. It's what the UN uses to predict climate change. It was developed here at MIT. And for schools and organizations, I highly recommend collaborating with your local indigenous community. The tribes have been the stewards of these lands for so long, and they have an intergenerational relationships within their community. They really know how to work with your community and what your community needs. So set up a meeting with your tribe, tell the stories, and learn how they take care of the land.
Yeah, for students, I'll say try to find community within your school and also within your city. Work with your teachers. We have done it in Somerville and it worked. So yeah, but just other things is join a climate hub, a local climate hub. There's Sunrise. That's just an example, but there's a lot of other ones. Yeah.
And I think for one thing that I'll ask everybody to do is after this, I think the first step is talk about it. You know, somebody who's not in this event, share some of their stories, talk about what you learned, some of the flyers that you've gotten of resources, bring it up to your friends, your teachers, and that's where we start if we talk about it. So thank you all so much for this, and I hope that you learned a lot and walked away with some action items on how you can help be part of this movement of climate education and therefore climate action.
Please welcome Aladin Joroff, Deputy Climate Chief at the Governor's Office of Climate Innovation and Resilience.
Hi. Thank you. Hi. Wonderful to see so many people here, and thank you for inviting me to join you tonight. It's a hard panel to follow, but I will say what was inspiring is many people often ask, how do I get involved in climate change? How can I make a difference? We just heard a lot of inspiring ways. Showing up at an event like this is one as well. Learning about climate change is what's going to help give us all as individuals the tools to address climate change, whether it's reducing emissions so that we lessen the impacts of climate change or dealing with the impacts that we know we're already going to see. So some of you may remember when recycling started. A large part of the reason that got going was students, like in elementary and middle school, were taught about recycling. They went home, and every time their parents put a can in the garbage can, they would go and take it out and put it in a recycling bag. Same thing with like turning off water when you're brushing your teeth, right? Some of these things start with the youngest generations teaching everybody else and making it a habit in our lives. And as individuals, our actions around climate change matter. And it can be as inspiring as, becoming an elected official, joining causes, but it can be things we do in our daily lives individually as well. And I say this because climate change can feel overwhelming, right? It is a very large global issue. But if we think about just a few examples, so in the energy sector, we know the most cost-effective way of reducing emissions is to use less energy. So turning off a light when you're not in a room. In the transportation sector, if there's public transportation available, taking a bus or a train instead of a car ride, right? That can reduce emissions. And you may feel when you're doing that, like, is that so significant? But when you look on the bus and you see the 20 other passengers, you think, oh, that's 20 people. And there are 20 other buses going around my town. And there's 20 other towns in my state with bus systems. And there's 50 other states, right? It's collective that our individual action matters. And I'll just reference, there was a study, it was in 2009, so the data may be a little out of date, but the principle is the same. And it studied what they called the behavioral wedge from household activities. And it said things that we as individuals can do in our homes, not high technology lifts. We're not talking about adding heat pumps. Things we can do in our behavior can collectively reduce approximately 7.5% of US emissions. So that's just things we can do at home. And then on the resilience side, when we think about increasing storm events, right, heavier rains, if you walk around streets, right, and see the storm drains on the ground, those grates, they're designed so, right, the water flows through during a storm event. Well, particularly like in the fall when the leaves are falling, if those get clogged up, the rain doesn't go down, it pools back onto the street, and when it gets really bad, it goes into people's houses, can flood streets, homes. So if you're walking by, you can just use the side of your foot, right, clear it off from the sidewalk side, not the street side. Be safe. But there are studies about this where there was a village in England that had a really significant flood event. And they did an analysis afterwards and said, if we clear off this system of storm drains, we think that would solve the problem. And the next time they had a same size weather event, they didn't have any flooding because they proactively had volunteers going out and clearing out these grates. And you don't need special equipment or anything. So there's a lot we can do individually. And as we already heard, we are all or will become, consumers, voters, officials. We are peers. We talk to our friends and families, right? There's a lot of ways to engage and influence. And I'll say for people who are still studying, no matter what classes you're taking or career you go into, you are going to have some interaction with climate change, right? Our prior speakers were just talking about the really interdisciplinary nature of studying climate change. It's true when you're working as well, right? You may be working on priorities like housing or economic development, biodiversity, equity. They are all affected by climate change, and climate change can affect them. So we really need this integrated approach where we look for synergies and how we maximize our co-benefits. If we're going to take an action, how do we do it in a way that's good for climate change and improves affordability and public health and equity? Why not go for lots of good things at once, but let's keep climate change in the mix because it's always going to be there and have a role. And this is part of the reason Governor Healy created the Office of Climate Resilience and Innovation, was to integrate a whole of government approach to climate change, to make sure we do not accidentally silo these issues and really think about how our actions interweave. And you'll see in the title, innovation is part of the title. That's because climate change is a challenge. It also presents opportunities. And one of those is innovation. Like Massachusetts has been a leader in innovation, and MIT is obviously a large part of that. Innovation is at the heart of MIT. So we want to look for those opportunities. We don't just need to take action, let's make things better at the same time. If we're going to have to do a lot of work, what more can we get from it? Let's be really creative in what we're doing. And again, an underlying piece of all of this goes back to, I think, why we're here. Having climate change in our DNA of analysis and decision making requires a lot of education, a lot of knowledge. And I'll just say at a personal level, when I grew up in the area, so I took some of the middle school and high school classes that MIT offered before I came to school here. So I will add my personal thanks to all the volunteers and staff and faculty who make these courses and these programs possible. It's really important, and I really appreciate the work everyone's doing, and I hope everyone in this room keeps moving forward as climate activists. So thank you all so much.
Please welcome Yashasvi Raj, PhD candidate at the Center for Climate Repair at the University of Cambridge.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me all right. I want to start off with my PhD research by showing you this really iconic photograph. I'm sure a lot of you have already recognized this photo. This photo is called Earthrise, and it was taken in 1968 during the Apollo 8 lunar mission by astronaut William Anders. And this was a really impactful photo at the time because it showed our vast and powerful Earth as actually just a small and delicate and finite planet. And this helped realize that we really need to protect it. And it helped catalyze the modern environmental movement. At the same time, in 1968, this is what the map of global temperature anomalies looked like. And back then, our warming was relatively moderate. But as we fast forward to the present day, I'd like you to pay attention to the redder areas, the areas of higher temperature anomalies. And you can see right at the northern hemisphere, especially towards the Arctic, it's much redder. And that's because the Arctic is warming 4 times faster. And this warming has had a significant effect on ice cover as well. This is 2 images showing simulated ice cover between 1984 and 2016. And within about 3 decades, we've already lost about 60% of ice cover. And not only that, I want you to take a look at these 2 images and see the shift in color. On the left side, it's much whiter, but on the right side, it's actually quite darker. And if you've been outside in the summer on the black asphalt, you know that dark surfaces absorb heat. And so what's happening now is as the surfaces get darker, they're absorbing more heat. which means that there's more ice melting, which means that there's darker surfaces, and this self-destructive cycle is something called Arctic amplification. And this accelerated warming means that we might have an ice-free summer as soon as 2035. And this could have global consequences like sea level rise and extreme weather conditions. Right, so what can we do? Well, already by attending this, you're being a more educated citizen, a more educated voter, leading to better sustainability policies. And that has curbed our emissions. However, in terms of the Arctic, emissions reductions might not be enough. And carbon capture and storage, these are very important things for the fight against climate change. But unfortunately, these technologies are still not scaling fast enough. So this is when we ask ourselves an unconventional question. What if we could reflect sunlight back into space as a temporary measure to help cool the Arctic while solutions like decarbonization and carbon capture ramp up? And this idea is called solar radiation management. This umbrella term includes several different techniques, from injecting aerosols into the stratosphere to mimic the cooling effect of volcanoes, to even wackier ideas like giant space mirrors. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to concentrate on this one right here, which is based off of my PhD, called marine cloud brightening. Now, marine cloud brightening, the idea behind that is, what if we could increase the albedo, or the reflectivity of clouds? And this could potentially reflect sunlight back into space as a regional cooling. Well, how does that work? Well, so here we have a white cloud. It reflects sunlight. In contrast, a darker cloud reflects less sunlight. And the difference between these two is just the droplet size within those clouds. A white cloud is comprised of smaller droplets, whereas a large, like a rainy cloud, the dark cloud, is comprised of large droplets. And each of these droplets, they grow on a seed, and that seed is called a cloud condensation nucleus. The idea behind marine cloud brightening is, what if we could add more seeds into existing clouds in the form of sea salt crystals? And we could do that with a little ship that sprays droplets into an existing cloud. And the idea is that potentially this could brighten or whiten the cloud, increasing the solar radiation reflection, thus calling a local cooling. And interestingly enough, we've actually accidentally been doing this already. This is a photo of the North Atlantic trade routes for cargo ships. And these white streaks here that you see are clouds that were formed on tiny sulfur particles in the exhaust of cargo ships. So it had a cooling effect while also increasing air pollution. Not great. But the idea is, what if we could do this deliberately without the use of pollutants? And this is where the science comes in. So our research has seen that we need the following technology requirements, specifically the first two. We need tiny, tiny particles, 30 to 500 nanometers in size, and we need a lot of them, 10 to the 15 to 10 to the 17 of these particles per second. Also, for scaling, we need to make sure that it doesn't actually take too much power. It needs to be robust against environmental conditions, because seawater is actually quite corrosive to work with. And also, it needs to be scalable for potential continental-sized deployment. So on the right here, there's a photo of these droplet cannons by our collaborators in Australia at Southern Cross University. However, the size of droplets that they're generating and the rate at which they're generating them at is still too low, and that's why we need innovation. And this is where I come in. When I started my PhD, I remembered what my dad actually taught me, which was that when you come towards a problem, you want to see how nature did it first. And nature makes sea spray as it's the most abundant aerosol produced in the world. And the way it works is that as waves crash over the surface of the ocean, it traps air, forming bubbles. These bubbles then burst, and they release a wide spray of tiny droplets. Now, these droplets then, some large ones will fall back to the surface, but some of the other ones will waft up into the cloud layer to form clouds. But how can we do this deliberately? How can we control this process? So this is a video of my experimental setup at the University of Cambridge. And what I'm able to do is use a small rubber tubing that I poked a bunch of holes in, and I pass a low compressed air through it. And you can see in this bottom left corner that it's making a lot of bubbles. And these bubbles are being generated and burst right at the surface. And this process creates a really fine mist of droplets. And my preliminary research has seen that when testing with 3.5% salinity or salty water, which is roughly the salinity of the ocean, I'm able to generate 10 to the 10 particles per second, of which 70% of them are within the MCB range that I described previously. So it's really exciting. The one thing that I need to work on is improving the energy efficiency of this. An exciting way to do that is actually integrating it into an existing system called a bubble drag reduction system. And that's actually being researched here at MIT, where if you can inject a layer of bubbles right underneath the helm of a ship, you can actually reduce the drag and reduce the fuel costs for a cargo ship. And this could potentially then leave a raft of bubbles that we could burst to brighten clouds, or just leave it there as a white reflective streak when there aren't clouds to brighten. Now, to end my talk, I'd like to first remind people that, to be absolutely clear, marine cloud brightening is not a cure to climate change. It's not a replacement for cutting emissions or decarbonization or ramping up clean energy. But what it might be able to do is buy us time to scale these solutions and slow down Arctic sea level loss. And this is a very small part of the larger climate action picture. It's controversial, it's not perfect, but it's a conversation that we need to have responsibly, ethically, and inclusively. And that's where you all come in, not just as future scientists, but as educators and activists, policymakers, engineers, and informed citizens. Because climate action isn't just about technology, it's about collaboration and community. So I also want to take this moment to congratulate all of you for whether this is your first step or your 100th step in the climate space, for attending this event and choosing to care and to learn and to act. So as we close, I ask you today to just carry these ideas forward with a creativity and integrity and hope. And maybe we'll be able to brighten some clouds, but more importantly, I hope that we can brighten the future together. Thank you.
Please welcome Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics, a Media Lab Director's Fellow.
This work? Does this work? Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. Today we're here to talk about something that affects us all, climate change. Today marks a very pivotal moment in time. The decisions that we make now have an impact on future generations. Climate change isn't just an environmentalism issue, it's a social justice issue, it's an economic issue, and it's also a moral imperative. As someone who prides itself on influence and responsibility, what an honor it is to be here to talk about this topic. MIT, thank you for having me. Today we're going to talk about the crossover and intersection between environmentalism, social justice, and education in combination with raising awareness, leveraging your platform and influence, and investing in a sustainable future. But let me be clear. I think we're in a little bit of a crisis. This isn't just fiction. This is reality. This isn't TikTok. And some of these things are happening on our watch. I was taught that the justice of all human well-being is all-encompassing. My grandmother taught me the importance of education. She also taught me the importance of recycling. She would get upset if I threw like my water bottles in the wrong trash, and she also made me like pick up trash on our walks to the park. As a 7-year-old, I would question her, but this had an impact on my journey. She also had a garden where metaphorically I learned to plant seeds and nourish the soil. This also had an impact on my journey, which led me to communities and organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, where I was joined by a bunch of other young people, just like you all, who had a passion for climate change. And now I'm here at the Day of Climate event at MIT, speaking about the effects of environmentalism, and I hope I'm making my grandmother proud. Thank you. More for it. One of the more concerning effects of climate change is the weather patterns. Floods, droughts, heat waves are all examples of these events. These events put pressure on the infrastructure of our community, the infrastructure of our society, the infrastructure of our economic and health systems, and they make vulnerable populations a little bit more vulnerable who necessarily don't have the chance to defend themselves. This is inequity. This is a call to action for all of us and a major concern. I believe that environmentalism and climate change isn't just something that we should think about. It's also an evolution of our thought process, from serving our ecosystems to helping our ecosystems, from the understanding of footprint to the embracing of your soul print. You know, the concerns, the causes, the consequences of greed and capitalism, from the products we use to the rivers we poison. My question is, globally, is it clean energy if we leave dirty footprints? Education and awareness is key. A lot of people have a hard time seeing that climate change is affecting our day-to-day lives. They see it as something distant. But the reality is that climate change is already here. Our air, our oceans, our forests are already being compromised. These aren't just social media events. We've already seen the fires in California to the hurricanes in the Caribbean. Education and preparation is key. The disruption of ecosystems and environments are imminent. And as a society, because of the awareness, I believe that we are ill prepared. But I'm optimistic because education has the power to transform societies. It always has. It's no coincidence that the solutions to environmental problems and challenges come from places like this and young people and young minds like you all here today. This year I had the pleasure of meeting one of my heroes, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Shout out to Bill. Bill made, science accessible and exciting through his platform. Through my platform, I aim to do the same. He inspired a generation to care about science and environmentalism and physics, all while indulging in dad jokes. I think this generation needs more of that, more learning, more inspiration, more action, more desire, more solution-based thinking. As an athlete, I've been able to travel all over the world, meeting people of all walks of life, experiencing the beauty of our planet. And I've already seen through my travels the evidence that our changing world is here. The science is real. Human activity, the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, the greenhouse gases that affect our atmosphere, leading to a warmer planet. Has anybody ever had a fever? What happens when you have a fever? The body heats up. What does that tell you? What does that mean when the body heats up? It's trying to heal. Now, Earth is heating up. It releases water. We see storms, floods, rising tides, unseasonal rains are all examples of the Earth responding, trying to cool itself down, attempting to heal. No different. I take responsibility on the court. I believe we all should take responsibility of our environment through strategy, through teamwork, through sacrifice. I think this is essential. I want everybody to close their eyes. Imagine that we're all on the same team. Same arena, same jerseys, and the game is on the line. Now think about this. We're not just playing for ourselves, we're playing for the next generation. Open your eyes. Who is willing to do what it takes to win? To invest is not just monetary. Investing is time, effort, energy, and resources. We need to invest in sustainable communities. We need to invest in clean technology. We also need to invest in education that fosters environmental stewardship. To invest in our environment is an investment in us. To young people, to young minds who may be listening, when you dream about your future, dream about a future that brings harmony and balance with Earth. To the jobs you choose, to the food you eat, to the energy you invest. Think about how you can bring harmony to our planet rather than taking or extracting from it. Our Earth is at risk. She is slowly being taken advantage of, and the people responsible have names, have companies, have incentives, have egos. This is the city of champions, right? So I think we should all take responsibility and carry a championship mindset in our environment. It starts with us, and we can start a global movement in the future. Nicholas Negroponte, a name that some of you guys will be familiar with here at MIT. His vision with the MIT Media Lab was to create an environment where a bunch of collective minds and subjects can work together. Change doesn't come from one plan, one person, one initiative. It comes from a host of people all working together in unison. So that when I look into the crowd, that's what I see here today. If you haven't got involved in your community and your environment, this speech is your cue. I want to see a movement for climate action. It's not about just us, it's about securing a safe and livable future for our generation, for the next generation. We have the power, we have the resources, we have the intelligence. Do we have the willpower? Do we have the desire? Do we have the foresight in order to secure a livable future for the next generation? In closing, the fight for climate change is a response for justice. It is an urgency for the next generation. It is a preparation for communities who are ill-prepared, and it is an insistence for us and our values that we hold as human beings. Let's stand together, united in our purpose, with unwavering commitment. The time to act is now. Thank you. Done?
Please welcome Cynthia Brazil, Dean of Digital Learning and Professor of Media Arts and Sciences.
All right, what an amazing day, what an amazing event. I am Cynthia Brazil. I am the final speaker in this part of the program, and it is my privilege and my honor to help bring us together as a community to really express our gratitude and appreciation for everyone who was involved in making this event possible today through your participation, and all the people who do the work behind the scenes to make the Day of Climate program possible. So, whereas everybody, you've been such an awesome, quiet, attentive audience, in my remarks, I want you to make a lot of noise. Woo! All right. So, first, we really have to give Claudia Urrea, the PK-12 team, and Open Learning a huge round of applause for the tremendous amount of work that they've done And our faculty advisors, Eric Klopfer, Peter Senge, and Pawan Sinha, for their advice and guidance through the creation and the execution of this program. I want to thank the Climate Action Through Education, the CATE team, and the Boston Earth Day team, who also contributed to the organization of today's event. Thank you. A huge thank you to Michael John Gorman and the MIT Museum. What a perfect venue for this event. Beautiful space. Thank you so much for hosting us. And I want to express our deep, warm appreciation for the generous support from Dirk and Charlene Capsinel as well for helping to create the Day of Climate program. All right. So some of you may know, some of you may not know, but MIT is actually quite passionate about K-12 education. So when we had this concept of the Day of Climate program, we wanted to get curriculum, as we've said from Chris Knittel, world-class, innovative, free curriculum. We ran what's called an RFP, or request for proposal process, where we basically sent out to the whole MIT community saying, hey, we want to start to create terrific curriculum that teachers can teach in K-12 classrooms to students from elementary to middle school or high school. Would you like to contribute materials? And MIT answered the call across all of MIT. And so I just want to give you a sense of just the breadth and the range of curriculum that MIT did just this year for this program. Okay, so just to kind of put this into perspective, CATE contributed curriculum on topics such as industrial revolution and climate change for middle school, climate and renewable energy, and the impact of population growth on climate. The MIT App Inventor team contributed curriculum for elementary school students and upwards on water ecosystems and climate change. The MIT Edgerton Center contributed curriculum for middle school students on coastal climate science. The School of Architecture contributed curriculum on the impact of construction on carbon emissions and climate-resilient future buildings. The MIT Environmental Solutions Initiative developed a curriculum on urban heat islands, climate justice, geothermal energy networks, and curriculum for high school. The Day of AI contributed curriculum on data science, AI, and climate. And our Cambridge Public School collaborators and the PLIX team contributed curriculum on CUBE satellites for exploring outer space environment and urban ecology for elementary students and up. So just an amazing range of curriculum. So again, let's put our hands together in 1 year. And we're just getting started. World-class, free, innovative curriculum. So we had an amazing lineup of speakers. So again, let's just thank Chris Knittel, Pete Bouchard, Yashasvi Raj, and Jaylen Brown, and Adeline Joroff, who just shared phenomenal presentations. Thank you all so much. I want to thank those who participated in our grantee showcase. And we had this terrific learners and educators panel led by Margaret Wang. Thank you, Margaret, for leading that panel. And of course, we heard from our true stars, who are our K-12 students and educators, who presented really exciting projects here as well. You are the stars and you are the future, so we really want to celebrate and honor your contributions for today. So thank you for all the students and teachers who are here presenting their work, their ideas, their passion. Really phenomenal, really, really phenomenal. You're really showing us how you can make such a big difference from these high-quality educational content combined with the passion of K-12 educators and our students. And it's just been truly inspiring to witness how our whole community came together today and demonstrated the power of collaboration and advocacy in driving meaningful change. So as we conclude, let's just remember the significance of empowering K-12 learners and educators with the tools and knowledge to tackle climate change. The connections and insights gained here today are really just the beginning. We encourage everyone to continue their efforts in their communities, leveraging what we've learned today to make a positive impact. So please stay engaged with Day of Climate at MIT and explore further opportunities for collaboration and learning. And together, we really have the collective power to create a sustainable and resilient future. So thank you so much. So the Day of Climate at MIT was put forth by the larger MIT PK-12 initiative. It's a brand new initiative at MIT. I think you're going to be hearing a lot of exciting work being done by this group. And we're going to have some really exciting workshops next. So I'll invite Claudia to tell you a little bit more about them. Again, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I want to invite the speakers also to the front. We have a little gift for you, but we have 3 workshops that are going to happen from 6:30 to 7. We also have appetizers and drinks and social. So I welcome you to that. We have inroads in this space. We have MapWorks in one of the workshops in the beginning, and then we do have a climate change in in wind turbines, right? So wind turbines. So one of the educators from CATE is going to run also a workshop for us. So don't miss the opportunity to work with those educators in this 30 minutes and continue this excitement work. Speakers.